Kale stumbled through the waist-deep snow, his boots making a muffled squelching sound that was either heroic or pathetic. He wasn't sure which. Every gust of wind felt like a tiny hammer slamming against his cheeks, and he swore he could hear the snow laughing at his human stubbornness. The research outpost he called home loomed in the distance, a patchwork of metal panels and blinking lights, looking less like civilization and more like a frostbitten tin can holding onto life by sheer stubbornness. He tugged his jacket tighter, though the padding did little against the planetary wind that seemed intent on teaching him humility. He muttered curses in 3 languages, most of which only sounded impressive in theory, while his fingers went numb, making him question whether survival was really worth this much effort. Then he saw her. She was crouched behind a stack of frost-coated crates that had probably been used for cargo shipments decades before anyone remembered what was inside. Her form was almost human, slender and small, with long ears rising like delicate antennas from her head, twitching nervously at every gust of wind. Her eyes, the color of liquid silver, reflected the pale sun in a way that made them look alive even through her fear. Kale froze, not out of terror but because she was shivering violently, her body wrapped in a threadbare cloak that had clearly seen better days, possibly centuries ago in galactic terms. "Well," Kale said, raising a gloved hand in an awkward greeting, "you don't look like you're surviving the weather without some serious outerwear, or luck, probably both." His teeth chattered, but he tried for casual humor, hoping it would buy him some trust points. The girl tilted her head, her long ears twitching further like a cat measuring whether this human was dangerous or just profoundly confused. She began, her voice soft and trembling. Kale noticed it sounded musical, like tiny wind chimes caught in a breeze. He caught himself thinking it might be better if she kept talking. Background noise is important. "You help," she finally whispered. Kale swallowed hard. "Help? You me or my dignity?" he asked. He wasn't joking, both were in immediate danger, but the girl didn't laugh. She just nodded, teeth chattering. The wind howled again, a relentless, icy beast that seemed offended by their presence. Kale's rational brain screamed that hugging a stranger in snowstorms was a terrible idea. His heart, however, had other plans. He yanked his jacket free, already half frozen to his body, and offered it to her. The alien girl hesitated. Pride or instinct made her stiffen, but then she shivered so violently that Kale had no choice but to step closer. "Look, I'm not a cuddle monster," he said quickly, fumbling the words as the cold crept into his bones, "but I can guarantee that sharing this jacket is statistically proven to reduce shivering. Or at least I hope. I didn't read the fine print." Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time he thought he saw her smile, a ghost of humor hiding in her fear. She stepped into the jacket, careful not to trip over its massive size. Kale adjusted the zipper awkwardly, feeling more like a human burrito than a rescuer. "You really do everything in giant sizes, huh?" she muttered in her musical voice, her ears flicking with every syllable. Kale laughed despite himself. "Welcome to humanity," he said. "Everything bigger, clumsier, and somehow more combustible than it should be." The wind tossed snow into their faces as they huddled together. Kale realized that even if the planet tried to crush them with frostbite and humiliation, they might just survive because absurdity has a way of keeping spirits alive. He nudged her shoulder lightly. "Don't worry, I'm a professional at freezing horribly, so you're in good company." She tilted her head again, eyes scanning him with something between suspicion and curiosity. He tried a joke about how her ears could probably pick up the snow gossip before it even started, and she let out a laugh so soft it was swallowed by the wind, but it was enough. Enough to remind him that, even on this frozen rock at the edge of a dying system, humor and warmth had a place. Kale motioned toward the outpost. "We should move before the cold decides to give us both the finger permanently. Also, I'm not above bribery with snacks if you're motivated that way." He tugged at her hand, gently guiding her through the snow. Her movements were graceful despite the shivers, and he had to admit that her ears flopping behind her with every step made the journey oddly entertaining. Along the way, Kale made a running commentary narrating their perilous trek with exaggerated heroics. "And here, dear listeners of the intergalactic saga, we face the fearsome slopes of knee-deep snow," he said dramatically, slipping slightly and catching himself with a grunt. Lyra, he was starting to call her that in his head, let out a tiny, melodic snort that sounded like a string of music notes. You should write an epic about this, she said between teeth-chattering laughs. Humans are ridiculous. Yes, exactly, he said, trying to make her laugh again, only to trip and almost send them both tumbling. She reached out and steadied him, her hands surprisingly warm despite her own shivering. Maybe we're ridiculous together, she admitted quietly. Kale's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. By the time they reached the outpost, their clothes plastered with snow and their cheeks pink from the wind, Kale realized that the alien girl wasn't just surviving. She was already changing him. He handed her a small, portable heater he carried, joking that it was a human invention designed to cheat the universe. She looked at it skeptically, then accepted it, placing it near her cloak and warming her hands. Kale leaned back against the wall of the outpost, watching her with an odd mix of admiration and amusement. You know, he said, if someone had told me this morning that I'd be saving a frostbitten alien with great ears and even better hair in a snowstorm, I would have asked what they were smoking. He laughed softly and she joined him, the sound so light it seemed almost impossible on such a frozen, hostile planet. For a long while they sat there, sharing warmth and shivering in tandem, discovering in small, ridiculous ways that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding someone to laugh with when the universe decided to be a cosmic jerk. Every gust of wind and flying snowflake became part of the story they were beginning to write together. A story of absurd heroics, small acts of care, and the strange, growing feeling that maybe, just maybe, warmth could exist even in the coldest places. Kale and Lyra stepped out of the outpost into the alien city, and Kale immediately regretted the decision. The ground beneath them wasn't solid in the way a human foot expected. It shimmered and pulsed as if it were alive, subtly shifting with every step. Kale hopped in place for a moment, glancing down at his boots like they might be contagious. Okay, he muttered, either the floor is alive or I'm hallucinating from frostbite. Or maybe both. Excellent. Lyra's ears twitched in amusement, the long tips brushing the edges of her hood. She tilted her head, her silver eyes gleaming, and said, it's safe, mostly. Mostly, Kale echoed, squinting at the pulsing ground. Mostly is a great word if you like surprises. Mostly safe is the human version of you might die. Lyra let out a musical laugh, her breath forming tiny clouds in the alien air. You humans are dramatic, she said, shaking her head. Kale raised an eyebrow. Dramatic me never, I'm merely highly descriptive. The city stretched out in all directions, a labyrinth of luminescent towers that seemed to hum softly, like living organisms breathing in unison. Hovering vehicles zipped past, trailing sparks of bioluminescent particles that painted streaks of color across the sky. Kale followed Lyra with a cautious gait, tripping over a barely visible step that wasn't there a second ago. I swear the city is plotting against me, he muttered, grasping a railing that shifted slightly under his hand. Lyra shot him a glance, one corner of her mouth twitching in amusement. You're not plotting against it, she said. You're interacting poorly. As they navigated the streets, Kale tried to blend in, a mistake that quickly became apparent. He stepped onto a hovering walkway, expecting a conveyor-like surface, only to almost somersault into a glowing fountain. Lyra snorted and flicked her ears, saying, you might survive if you stop moving like a panicked snow monkey. Kale waved his hands in surrender. Noted, panicked snow monkey, identity crisis accepted. He took a deep breath and tried again, this time walking carefully, though the walkway tilted and wobbled as if amused by his human incompetence. They passed an open market filled with alien merchants selling items that defied logic. Floating crystals that hummed with energy, containers of shifting liquid that appeared to defy gravity, and devices that changed color depending on who looked at them. Kale's eyes widened. Is that soup? He asked, pointing to a levitating orb that pulsed with green light. No, Lyra replied, that's a nutrient sphere. Soup would be grossly inefficient here, also dangerous, trust me. Kale scratched his head. Efficient soup, huh? Humans are going to feel very inadequate about this later. Their path was not without risk. A pair of drones, sleek and insect-like, hovered nearby, scanning the crowd with bright lenses. Kale ducked instinctively behind a floating kiosk. Why do they always pick the humans who look like they're trying to invent gravity with their feet? He muttered, Lyra's ears twitched in amusement. They aren't after you mostly, she said. Mostly is bad again, he asked. Mostly is a precaution, she replied. Take notes. As they continued, Kale shared what little food he had left. The small protein rations were a curiosity to Lyra, who examined them with a mixture of suspicion and interest. You call this sustenance? She asked. Kale held one up. It's the pinnacle of human culinary science. You can survive for days and still look slightly disappointed. Lyra tilted her head, her ears flicking. Disappointment is universal, she said softly. Kale handed her a piece, joking, then consider this an interspecies peace offering. Or a slightly chewy apology for dragging you through a freezing wasteland. She smiled faintly, popping the square into her mouth. Hours passed, and the city began to feel less hostile as Kale and Lyra found a rhythm. Lyra taught him a telepathic greeting, a subtle flick of energy that made Kale feel like his brain was momentarily on vacation. He tried it once, accidentally zapping a passing merchant, who glared at him and muttered in a language Kale didn't understand. Great, he said, rubbing his forehead. I'm officially a telepathic menace. Lyra's laughter, musical and warm, echoed over the pulsing streets. You're enthusiastic, she said, trying not to giggle. Enthusiastic is one word for it, Kale said, bowing dramatically. They reached a quiet alcove atop one of the luminescent towers. The wind was still sharp, but the height gave them a view of the city that was breathtaking. Ribbons of glowing pathways intertwined like veins of a living organism, vehicles darting through them like neon fireflies. Kale plopped down, exhausted, and Lyra rested her head on his shoulder. He looked at her ears flopping slightly in the wind and said, You know, those ears should have their own zip code. They're impressive. She flicked them in mock offense. Impressive, yes, distracting also yes, she said softly. Kale smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater in his pocket. You're lucky, he said quietly. I have a great sense of humor and terrible balance. Both are necessary for survival here. Lyra shifted slightly, her silver eyes meeting his. I think we'll manage, she said, her voice carrying a note of genuine trust. Kale nodded, hiding a grin. Manage, we'll thrive, or at least survive spectacularly with dramatic flair. As night fell, the city glowed brighter, its bioluminescence painting their faces in hues of blues, purples, and greens. Kale whispered a joke about alien nightlife being like intergalactic disco chaos, and Lyra laughed softly, ears twitching with delight. The alcove, the city, the strange pulse beneath their feet, all of it became a stage for small, ridiculous acts of companionship. Kale realized that the warmth between them had little to do with physical jackets or portable heaters. It was built from humor, shared mistakes, and the fragile trust forming in moments of absurdity. The chapter ended with Kale and Lyra sitting side by side, the city alive around them, their laughter mingling with the hum of hovering vehicles and the soft pulse of light beneath their feet. Each joke, each glance, each accidental stumble through the alien streets was a stitch in the fabric of a bond that might survive even the strangest, most hostile worlds. Kale leaned back, muttering under his breath, who knew surviving an alien city could be so entertaining? Lyra tilted her head, ears flicking in approval. You humans are ridiculous, she said, and yet somehow not unbearable. Kale woke to the faint hum of the city below, its luminescent veins twisting and pulsing like a heartbeat in the pre-dawn light. Lyra was already awake, perched on the edge of the alcove, her silver eyes scanning the skyline with a mixture of caution and curiosity. She twisted her long ears, catching every subtle vibration in the air, every whisper of wind, every distant footstep, and Kale felt a pang of admiration. Somehow she had always seemed both delicate and formidable, a paradox he couldn't help but find fascinating. I have a feeling today won't be boring, Kale muttered, tugging his jacket tighter though the alcove's heat field barely required it. Lyra tilted her head. Boring is a human fear, she said. Danger is optional mostly. Kale groaned. Mostly again? I think I need a tutorial on how to live in mostly safe zones before I become an interstellar casualty. The city seemed to respond to their presence, the lights flickering and the pathways adjusting like living things aware of observers. Kale tried to make a joke about their surroundings being sentient, but Lyra beat him to it, flicking her ears in amusement. Perhaps your presence is amusing them, she said, or alarming them, I can't tell. Kale shrugged. Either way, I'm honored to entertain a city of glowing skyscrapers. It beats frostbite for sure. Their day began with exploration, moving through sections of the city neither had dared enter before. Kale's sense of humor became an essential survival tool. Every misstep on the hoverwalks, every interaction with blinking, suspicious alien citizens was met with a sarcastic comment or a self-deprecating quip. "If I survive this," he said, "I deserve a medal or at least a slightly warm beverage." Lyra laughed, the sound blending with the city's hum, a musical note that made Kale realize how much he had grown accustomed to it. But their playful exploration was interrupted when a shadow fell over them, a rogue enforcer from Lyra's clan, moving with precision and menace. Kale froze, then whispered, "This is the part where dramatic music usually plays." "Are you ready?" Lyra's ears twitched and she nodded. "Mostly ready," she said, and Kale winced hearing that word again. The confrontation was tense, but Kale's wit and Lyra's agility created an improbable dance. Kale dodged with exaggerated flailing, using the environment in ways that were equal parts strategic and ridiculous. Lyra's long ears flicked constantly, detecting subtle shifts in the rogue's stance. Kale cracked a joke mid-leap. "If we survive this, I'm claiming superhero status, or at least honorary alien-human friendship medals." Lyra's laughter became part of their rhythm, diffusing fear in the middle of danger. Together, they outmaneuvered the enforcer. Kale used his makeshift knowledge of gravity fields to create a temporary slipstream that sent the rogue tumbling into a fountain of bioluminescent liquid. Lyra landed gracefully beside him, smirking. "You humans are unpredictable," she said, adjusting her cloak. Kale grinned. "Unpredictability is my specialty, also survival, mostly." Lyra rolled her eyes but didn't deny the effectiveness. Once the danger passed, they found a hidden enclave nestled between two towering structures, a place of warmth, safety, and strange alien technology that seemed almost alive. Kale slumped against a wall, exhausted, while Lyra explored quietly, fascinated by the interplay of energy streams and bioluminescent circuits. "It's beautiful," she said softly, turning to him. "I've never felt so safe." Kale looked at her, his own heart warming not from heaters but from the trust and openness she radiated. "We make a good team," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Maybe the best humans-alien duo the universe has ever mostly seen." As they settled, Kale shared more of his humor, their conversation laced with jokes, exaggerated stories of previous mishaps, and playful banter. Lyra, for the first time, seemed completely at ease, laughing at his absurdity, teasing him in return. Kale realized that the journey had changed him. He was no longer just a human trying to survive a harsh planet. He was someone capable of understanding, patience, and care beyond his species. He had learned to laugh at himself, to trust instinct and improvisation, and most importantly, to open his heart. The final moments came quietly. Kale handed Lyra a small thermal pack, joking, "For the dramatic shivers, only slightly exaggerated, I promise." She smiled, placing it against her chest. "You have a strange way of showing care," she said softly. "But I understand it." Kale felt the weight of unspoken words between them, the depth of the connection that had grown from shared warmth, shared laughter, and surviving impossibly together. Hours passed with small gestures that were surprisingly profound. Lyra used her telepathic abilities to show Kale the beauty of the city's patterns, how each pulse of light and movement of vehicles was a language he was only beginning to read. Kale responded with stories of human absurdity, of mistakes and triumphs, of frost-bitten toes and clumsy heroics. Their differences faded in importance, replaced by a profound companionship. By the time the sun, or whatever bright orb counted as one here, began to rise, casting streaks of alien color across the enclave, Kale and Lyra sat side by side, shoulders touching, the city alive around them. Kale cracked one last joke, about earning interstellar medals for surviving Lyra's world without accidentally destroying it, and she laughed fully, ears flicking in delight. Then quietly she rested her head against his shoulder, and he felt the warmth of trust, connection, and care more deeply than he had ever expected. Kale realized he had changed. He was no longer just a human trying to endure alien landscapes. He had become someone who could give and receive compassion, someone who could find humor in the darkest situations, and someone who could connect beyond the boundaries of species. Lyra, too, seemed changed, her eyes softer, her laughter freer, and her trust a precious gift she placed in his hands. As the city thrummed below them, Cale whispered, "I think we might be okay." Lyra's ears twitched in approval, a faint smile on her lips. "We are," she said simply. "Mostly okay," Cale laughed, shaking his head. "Completely okay, mostly is for rookies." And for the first time in a long while, Cale felt that the universe, with all its hazards, frozen winds, and glowing alien cities, had made space for something extraordinary. A bond built not on survival